Okay. Good afternoon. Look, regarding the Brexit talks and post-Brexit talks, the post-Brexit talks, between Boris uh, Johnson and Ursula, uh, it's becoming heated because the fact of the matter is Britain has to define its fluvial uh, bed boundaries and its land area and define, for example, as the Philippines did, what percentage of UK property and area value can be owned by foreigners, because there are a lot of foreigners, even interlocutors, seeping into Britain, and it's becoming porous because of the EU situation, to the extent where it's going to be a Malthus issue, such as the what's going on with the fisheries, where not just France, but just I did my research paper. One of my research papers when I studied economic geography was on Portugal. My country study was on Portugal, and there were various countries fishing off the waters of Portugal for its fisheries. Not only that, its green areas were becoming smaller and smaller due to urbanization. So its food resources were getting smaller and smaller in light of the European Economic Union. So you have to balance it out, whether or not your food resources are getting smaller by yourselves, and if it's still getting smaller in lieu of the European Economic Union. And you can't allow foreign interlocutors fishing off of your seabed, more than several actually, and you have to define the fluvial bed sea area. That pertain to your land area, because not only is UK land, but it's defined by its fluvial waters. And in terms of your land area, you have to define what percentage of UK property can be owned by foreigners. Because if you don't, it's just interlocutors are gonna seep in, as they are now. They're gonna try to own as much part of Britain as they can, economically. And so whether it's by sphere of economic influence or not. Okay, and that's the point of talks you have to go with Ursula, and you have to pass legislation in Britain to say at least no more than 40% of Britain's economic zones and property can be owned by foreigners. Okay, and that's the fact. And you have to define where Britain's fluvial bed seawaters are, and where it cannot be encroached, and it cannot be encroached by. Okay, so because in the case of Portugal, there are a host of countries fishing off of Portugal and stealing its sardines and what have you, and not only was urbanizing so much that its green areas were getting smaller and relegating it to olive farms and so forth. Okay, so and then it will allow you to develop it. So now, point of fact, the EU is already taking its fish So the same thing's happening in the Britain. So you have to, whether or not you wanted the Commonwealth, what we want to do is actually, so we want to exit out of this EU, and we want to own something like a Commonwealth of SUR, EU SUR, where we have our own jurisdiction of our boundaries, and we have some sort of Commonwealth along the lines of where we agree on certain trade and Commonwealth of the Psalms and so forth, and in terms of the economics of rail and so forth, and maybe have a deal with clearance systems and all that. Okay, maybe something like that. But we have to realize where those certain boundaries lay, because if we're just going to allow porousness into our nation and end up like Portugal, where a host of nations are just fishing off our coast and stealing our fish, then we're just going to end up like pussies. We cannot allow interlocutors. You have to define your land area. Everything has to be done through legislation, and it can be porous. Definitely, you have to. Okay. And so you have to do some geodetics, and so you probably do have to do Brexit, and if we're going to do our own EU SUR, well, it has to be based on some type of economy of rail, and everyone has to have their own national identity. Okay. Because it's just going to be like, as my professor said, some type of Euro Disney, where it's just going to be some sort of play lot, where it's just going to be, one price, everyone gets in, and just a microcosm of a culture that no longer was really there, and you're just paying to see something, just paying for a ride. You're just paying for a ride, and it's just going to be a Disneyland if you don't have your cultural identity. It's just going to be a microcosm. You're just paying for a ride. You have to have your own cultural identity, or else it's going to be so porous. You're going to have interlocutors stealing it's going to be a Malthus issue, and such as what's going on in the fisheries. If you don't define your fluvial bed and define what percentage of that particular piece of property can be allotted to foreign resources, okay? Because if not, it's just going to be, your culture is going to be museumized, okay? Your culture is just going to be museumized. Or just going to be turned into a play lot, and just going to be taken for a ride.